Welcome, everyone. We're just finishing a couple things now, so we're posting the link so that folks can watch this who haven't joined on Zoom. And I just want to clarify for those of you who have never been on a Zoom webinar before, the only people that you'll be able to see and hear during the first part of today's event are the panelists who you'll see on the screen right now. And you can chat if you've joined on the Zoom webinar. You can chat with us using the chat feature or the question and answer feature. And then at the end of the presentation, we will, because right now we're live on both Facebook and YouTube. At the end of the presentation, we'll stop that live stream, and then you'll be able to see and hear each other. So just as a clarification, we saw some questions coming across about that. All right, so panelists, have you got the links to share? Is all of that good? All right, Elizabeth.
All right, welcome everybody, and greetings from New York City. It's really lovely to welcome people from across the US, the UK, Jordan, Jerusalem, Lebanon, and who knows who's joining us on Facebook thanks to the links we've shared. But we're really glad that you are here, and I hope that you'll look forward to this conversation as much as I think we're enjoying the opportunity to share together. My name is Elizabeth Bowe, and I am a parishioner member of the vestry at the Church of the Heavenly Rest. And I also work on the presiding bishop staff in the Global Partnerships Office, which is how I actually met some of the people who are on this call initially. So I'm going to ask each of them to briefly introduce themselves before we get going into our program, starting with Robin.
I'm Robin Denny. I'm the rector of St. Mary's Episcopal Church in Napa.
And next on my screen is Lee.
Good evening, or at least that's where it is where I am. My name's Lee Batts, and I'm the team rector for the Epping team of churches close to London in the UK.
Great. And next on my screen is Matt.
I'm Matt Hyde. I'm rector of Church of the Heavenly Rest in New York City.
Great. And Anne-Marie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie, and I'm an associate rector at Church of the Heavenly Rest in New York City.
Great. Wadia.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Wadia Farr, and I'm the vicar of the Good Shepherd Church in South Jordan.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Olivia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I'm vicar for the Epping Team Ministry, working alongside Lee.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as you can hear, we're going to have some definite different context to learn from and about today. So this is the newest expression of a relationship that's been going for about 6 months. We started out between St. Mary's and Church of the Heavenly Rest and the Epping Team Ministries, and had some small group conversations and Bible studies last year, really just as we were all living into this very new way of being church, and wanting to embrace some of the blessings of this new way of being church, which allows us to do things like we're doing today and have time to be with each other and to learn more about each other, as well as learn more and live into our Christian faith together. So initially we started with our 3 churches doing monthly Bible studies. And then Robin had the great idea to reach out to Wadia, who she went to seminary with, to see if he and the community in Jordan and the Diocese of Jerusalem would be interested in joining us to, again, just expand our understanding of what it means to be the global body of Christ, and to learn from the experiences of our fellow Anglicans and Episcopalians. And it's been a fun connection as well, because both the Epping churches and the Church of the Heavenly Rest have done pilgrimages to the Holy Land. And I know that Wadia has also helped welcome pilgrimages. So it's fun to be on this virtual pilgrimage together. What we'll be doing during Lent, you'll hear a little bit about, I think, from our panelists, but really wanting to get this new expression going in a way of worshiping together, and then looking ahead to the rest of the year of how do we keep building relationships with each other, and how do we keep learning from each other and with each other, and how do we keep building up this wider community, expanded community that we certainly talk about at Heavenly Rest. And I know that resonates with everyone on this call as we look at how can we be together even if we cannot physically be together at this moment? And just think of what a joyful time it will be when we can finally visit each other in all of these wonderful places represented on our call. So to start everyone off, I'd love for us to just talk about our church communities and, who are we, how are we, and, what is life under the pandemic been like for everyone? Because I know there have been some similarities, but also maybe some differences as well. So we'll start in California with Robin.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So I'm just really excited to get to be a part of this conversation, and it was wonderful to get to know everyone through conversations leading up to this. So when I've listed the cities that are involved, you start Jerusalem, New York, London, Napa. One of these things is not like the other. It feels like a smaller community, a more rural community. So we definitely bring I think a different setting to the group, though all of us are in different settings. So we're a town here, the city of Napa, of about 80,000, between 80 and 90,000 people. And the whole Napa Valley has just around 100,000. So the other communities are quite small in our valley. And we're also joined in this conversation and partnership with Grace Episcopal Church, which is our next door neighbor church. And Ann Clark, who's the associate rector there, has been a part of our conversations, and she wasn't able to make it today. But also the rector of that church is my sister. So we actually live together. So we've been trying to do some different things together. We really have enjoyed the opportunity to collaborate on educational programs and whatnot. But as you might imagine, the primary sort of industry in our valley is tourism and the wine industry. So primarily agricultural and service related. And we have a lot of people that come through here every year. I'm not sure the number of tourists, but it's staggering. And the traffic and everything is related to tourism rather than people getting to work a lot of the time. But we've also this year especially been really affected by a number of disasters. So obviously the pandemic and its effect on the tourist industry has been massive. But then on top of that, we've had two major wildfires in our county in 2020, which burned a total of 40% of the land area of our county. So at the time that those fires were happening, there were fires all over California. It was just by far like 4 times the largest fire season that our state had ever had. And so of course that was on the news, but the individual impact of each fire, of course, was devastating. 5 lives were lost in the first of those fires, and just a huge number of businesses. So a lot of people lost their jobs, as not just because of the pandemic, but because the businesses burned down, hotels, restaurants, wineries. So it just had a really devastating impact on the community. And 3 years ago, we had major fires here as well, almost 4 years ago now, in 2017. Which also burned quite a number of homes and businesses. And then just a couple of years before that, there was a major earthquake, which damaged, I was just showing before we started the webinar, the arch that's right above my head in this church collapsed. And so they had to do a major renovation after the earthquake. So this is a valley and a community that's been really largely shaped by disaster over the very recent history. And because of that, I think there's a lot of strong connections actually within the community and a really robust sense of working together to try to overcome difficulty and disaster. So we're active participants in our local community organizations active in disaster. And there's a lot of connection with other organizations and a sense of encouragement to one another, which has been really, really neat to see and participate in, even though things have been so difficult. And the other thing I want to just mention is our Bible study that we did last fall with you all. We were talking about justice issues, and our valley has a lot to reckon with in terms of its history of injustice. We're one of the very early communities in California of white settlers that came in, and there's just a tremendously difficult history of genocide of the Native American peoples, as well as just extreme oppression of people of color, whether it was Chinese workers who came in, Japanese workers who came in, or Latino workers, and also African Americans. So this was one of the sundowner communities where African Americans were prohibited from being able to stay overnight to own property. And so, of course, the effect of that has just been devastating over generations, and is something that we hope to be a part of conversations that help to move towards healing. And our rector, who was here in the 1960s, so it was only 2 rectors ago, he went to Selma to march with Martin Luther King, and when he returned to Napa, received threats and had a difficult time. So we're also, we're proud of that history and being a part of those conversations even in the past, and hopeful that we can be part of good things in the future.
Great. Thanks so much, Robin. And we'll move a little bit further east and go to Anne Marie with the Church of the Heavenly Rest in New York.
Great, thanks so much, Elizabeth. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you, and we're so grateful to Elizabeth for all of these connections, and proud of Elizabeth as our own parishioner and vestry member. So thanks for the conversation. A little bit about Heavenly Rest. We're on 90th Street and 5th Avenue in New York City, which is right across the street from Central Park. The church looks out over Central Park. We're on what's called Museum Mile. So we're just a few blocks away from the Guggenheim Museum and the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So we're in a really interesting kind of cultural hub of the city. And we're a neighborhood church. We're a church where people have people's families have been coming to the church. Where the building was built in 1929. So we haven't been there for centuries, but we're a neighborhood church, a church of kind of deep connections and deep ties to the community. We're a joyful and creative parish. So we've always had connections to the arts, I think in part because of our location, and also just because of the energy of our parishioners and the gifts of our community. New York was hit really hard by the pandemic in March, and so like everybody else, went completely online in March, and just there was a lot of deep suffering in the city at that time, and we found that the transition to online ministries really helped clarify, I think, a part of our identity is being a community of really deep connection and deep belonging. We found the ability to pray together. We began praying morning prayer in Compline, having other programs throughout the day, really became grounding, life-saving almost, rhythm for us during that time, both for clergy and staff, and I think also for many members of our community. So we were grateful for those technologies, which we had never engaged before ever, to be able to make that transition and to keep those connections, and to, in some ways, even deepen our prayer life and our connections together. We talk about, we had morning prayer in the church every day, and a few people came to that every day, and it grew, tenfold when we went online and people could access from everywhere. And I think another thing that we've seen during this time about who we are is just that at the same time that we've been able to deepen connections and deepen our sense of belonging to each other and to God, we've also expanded our community. So we've gotten we've been able to use this moment to make connections like these, across time zones and oceans and all of that, which has really been a huge gift, to invite people to participate in our prayer life and our program life from all over the country and the world, to get to meet new people and make new connections has been a really, wonderful opportunity for us during this time, and has really enriched our community life. So Matt might have things to add from that.
Well, Anne-Marie's described it really well. It's for everybody all over. It's been a remarkable time of, we live as who we are, and we bring Robin described the history of her parish. So we bring our history into the present moment, and the Holy Spirit calls us forward. And so how do we live with the Holy Spirit in this moment? And as the Spirit always does, invite and broaden the community. Anne-Marie's done a remarkable job with our community of reaching out beyond our walls. And we've always been a city church. And in this time, we've really made it a focus to serve the city and to be in partnership, not only with the city's needs now, but with trying to be part of the reimagination of New York. Because we know, and again, Robin described it well, we are in multiple pandemics, some of which started long, at least in the United States, long before the health pandemic of COVID. And so we as a whole parish have tried to be engaged with not only the response to COVID, but to the economic, racial, and civic issues of the moment.
Thanks. And I wonder if one of you would just talk briefly about the name of the church, Church of the Heavenly Rest. It's not the most common Episcopal church name.
Well, that's right. The church was founded after the Civil War as a place of reconciliation and peace. And so we were founded at another time when our city was really in a difficult crisis. I mean, New York City in the American Civil War was deeply divided between North and South, more than you think, because it's square in the northern part of the United States. But within our Civil War, it was really torn apart. And so the story we've always told about ourselves is we were founded by veterans coming home from war who wanted reconciliation. And so this sense of being a place of peace and rest was important, not just for the folks inside the church, but for a city that was yearning for reconciliation. Now, as with so many of our histories, it's hard to document every piece of that, but the impulse to be a place of peace and reconciliation, I think, endures with us.
Thank you so much. All right, and now moving across part of the Atlantic Ocean to Epping. Lee, would you tell us a bit about your parish and the communities that are part of it?
Right, yeah, thank you. And really good, as I said before, to be amongst this group and to be part of this journey with everyone. So we serve the Epping Team Ministry, which is in the kind of county to the immediate east of London. So we are not London, but we are very much part of our life is dictated by our proximity to London. And we serve 3 distinct communities, and we are taking responsibility for a 4th community where we're currently supporting a new church plant in an area where the Christian presence has been very fragile for a long period of time. So we serve these 4 different communities, and through that we are given the gift of engaging with a range of different contexts. So to start with, the oldest of our congregations, which was planted in around about the year 1200, so it's relatively new by British standards, in 1200, and that was the old parish church for the town of Epping, and it's a place called Epping Upland, a village of about 1,000 people in a large part of farmland and with the one vineyard in West Essex. So there's some affinity with Napa. I don't know that we'd be quite ready for a wine tasting competition with you yet, but we do have that as something we can offer there. But what that does is it gives us a real connection with those who care for the land and who farm it in sort of the cultivated way. Actually, these days, as is common in most places, farming is done by 3 or 4 families and about 7 people, and it's principally cereals that we see growing around us, and that's part of the gift of our ministry, to engage in that world. And then our second oldest church is Coopersale, which is in the middle of Epping Forest. Epping Forest stretches from the borders of London, and we're at the very edge of it. It's one of the green lungs around the city, which kind of stops us from completely suffocating on the smog. It's preserved. It's a beautiful gift to us, and you actually drive to Coopersale by going through the forest and find it serving a community of about 1,200 people. It was founded in 1845 as a church. And so that gives us a real opportunity to reflect upon sort of uncultivated nature and the beauty of God in that kind of creation, and what's God saying there, and that's part of the beauty of the place. And then we come to Epping town itself, which had a market established from sort of the 1300s, but only really acquired its own parish church in 1880, and it's now a beautiful building, which is the larger of our congregation, serving a community of about 10,000 people. And together, these 3 churches with the church plant sort of come together to ensure that we have a life of nurture and support, and increasingly coming together to focus on those outward-facing ministries, many of which had to be paused because of COVID, and others which have emerged anew. And we thank God that during this time, and using Zoom, we've been able to engage small group wise with people who could never come out of an evening, for example. That's just one thing. And Epping itself is kind of on the edge. It's on the edge of this uncultivated wildlife. It's on the edge of cultivated wildlife. And yet actually we're on the edge of, I think, what the Americans would call the subway. And we would be in the centre of London in 45 minutes if the tube station is 10 minutes from where I sit here. And that relationship to London is quite an important part of the identity. We're definitely Essex. We're definitely a market town. And yet pre-COVID, most of the traffic was walking down the hill to get on a train to find their work in London. And in COVID, one of the things we're wrestling with is how many people are working from home, and the impact that has upon the degree of separation between work and leisure. And we're already beginning to think about how we as a church might respond to that. I think this may be true elsewhere. We're finding that people are not missing travelling to work, but they are in some ways missing being at work and being surrounded by the human beings. So that's part of it. Olivia leads on an eco-church initiative. That's something very important to us. We want to sort of be part of a wider agenda, that justice issue. We have also developed a ministry amongst those affected by dementia during these COVID times, and that's thanks to one of our colleagues. And so I think that the pandemic has been a really kind of important time, sad, and we're still a long way to go. But it's maybe also made us focus upon things that are really important, not least worship. We all scurried around wondering how we're going to worship, having for years taken for granted it would just be there on a Sunday. And like others on this call, just enjoying the fact that having discovered the virtual, more people are engaging with our worship than we ever thought might. And that's part of the exciting gift we have. So that's us in a nutshell. So the other thing I should say is a really big part of our life is we have church-sponsored schools. And we're very fortunate to have one of only 4 church-sponsored high schools in the whole diocese, as well as 3 church-sponsored primary schools. And it's been great fun offering collective worship again virtually, and learning this week, for example, that because they're all learning from home, our collective worship is being beamed into every primary school age child's home in the area. And we don't quite know what God will do with that, but that's again one of the exciting things that would never have happened if we'd not discovered the virtual. So that's us. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. All right, and last but not least, moving even further east geographically, Wadia.
So greetings everyone again, and it's my pleasure to introduce you a bit to our diocese. So the team that we have participating in this activity, this global Bible study, is actually a team that brings in the entirety of the diocese. So we have with us people who are in the youth group or people who serve with the youth group. So we have different ages, but it's from most countries of our diocese. Our diocese, one of the special things about it, one of the unique, lovely things and challenging things at the same time, is that we have 5 countries um, that make up our diocese. So you have Israel, you have Palestine, you have Jordan, you have Syria, and you have Lebanon. And that makes being part of this one diocese interesting and challenging at the same time, because of having to be in 5 different countries, having to walk the line between that, having to travel is not that easy, and actually doing simple things such as having a church synod or a church gathering or priests gathering is not that simple. So being part of this diocese gives us the lovely opportunity of working with people from different backgrounds, ministering with them, and walking with them in their lives, our diocese. But one of the other things that I want to say about the diocese is when our diocese was first established, it was established with some major points in mind. The first one was to create better connections with the Christians who were before us in these lands. As we all know, Christians have been in the Middle East for ages, mainly the Greek Orthodox Church. So one of our main goals was we're striving better connections with them. And we can say that that has happened and is happening on a daily basis. The other thing was getting the Bible and getting ministry out there for everyone. And that's why if you look at our diocese, you find that we have 30 plus institutions serving the people in the Holy Land, and we have about 33 parishes or around that number. So for us, it's really important to be part of the community, serve the community through our institutions as much as we're serving the Christian community here in the diocese. One thing that I usually keep telling my youth group is that you can be the first Christian person that someone has ever met. And I think that's another really major part of our identity here. We are part of the minority, which is, as history shows us, not such a bad thing for Christians to be. That gives us more aspects of ministry. And I've had that experience of being the first Christian that someone has ever met and having to go through the lovely responsibility of showing off the Christian love and showing off how we get together, how we can live together, and how we can be one. As with all of you, this pandemic has pushed us to reimagine our ministry. As you said, Reverend Lee, before this, we all were like, okay, yeah, we'll be in church on a Sunday morning. Although for us, that by itself was a challenge, because for us, Sunday here is a working day. It's not the weekend. The weekend, well, for some of our countries at least, the weekend is Friday and Saturday, but not on Sunday. At least that's the case in Jordan. So from early on, we had as a church to envision another time where people can come and worship. Worship was not an option. So we had to find ways of making sure that people can come to worship. And online ministry has just opened the doors for. So that's us in a nutshell. We love being here, and we are reminded that we are the living stones of the church. And this is one idea that I want to end with, and it's an idea that I share with everyone who come on pilgrimage here that I meet, is people usually come to the Holy Land in general to see the church, the old historic churches, the old historic landmarks. And sometimes, sadly, some people miss seeing the living stones of the churches who are there now. So consider this as a humble invitation for everyone watching. When you're in the Holy Land, we'd love to host you. We'd love to have you with us. We'd love to share worship with you. Just get in touch with any one of us, any one of that in the diocese, and we'd be more than happy to help with that. Come and see the living stones, be with us, worship with us. And that, I promise you, would be as exciting as just going and seeing the landmarks, if not even more. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. It is such a privilege to have you all with us. There are a number of us on the call who can speak to the transformation of getting to know the people in the Diocese of Jerusalem and listening to how you all continue to walk and minister literally in the footsteps of Jesus, and in also really powerful ways that serve the Christian community and so many more. And so we're really excited to have you all as part of this group and to get a chance to learn more about the context. I think a lot of people, when they think the Holy Land, have maybe a limited idea of where that is. It's specifically in one place, but I love the fact that you named all 5 countries that are part of the Diocese of Jerusalem, and we're so grateful that so many people from across the whole diocese are with us today, and we look forward to getting to know you all better, as well as getting to know the groups in our places better too. I was really struck by listening to everyone again of just the power of story. As Christians, we are a people of story. Jesus was very fond of telling stories that sometimes people understood and sometimes people completely misunderstood and had to be explained to them, which was a very human thing. But it was just really lovely to hear the stories of both the people and the places in each of the communities represented here, and some commonalities of tourism, having that connection where we're all now missing what was before the pandemic in terms of people being able to freely move and come visit, but also just the realities that we all face of our common connection with regard to climate justice, and the fact that regardless of where we are geographically, we live in one world. And so I know that's a definite topic of interest for everyone. So it will be really wonderful as the months go on this year to have more time to explore some of these things together. And so speaking of story, all of you are passionate about going outside of your comfort zones, whatever they may be, and embracing cross-cultural experiences, but whether that is within the church or beyond. And I wonder if you could each share briefly a cross-cultural experience that has been moving for you, something that has helped maybe crystallize something deep inside you that you were discerning, but you realized, no, this is absolutely what I need to be doing. So I'll let y'all think for a couple seconds. And then I realize this is it's a different question, right? Because you have to talk about yourself. So I will ask if somebody would like to go first. And if nobody volunteers, then I will volunteer you to go first. Anyone want to go first? Robin, I saw your hand up.
I'll go first. Yeah, because I've been spending some time this morning thinking about this question and trying to limit it to just one story. But what really struck me was kind of one of the first major experiences that I had that opened my eyes to how life-giving a cross-cultural friendship or relationship could be. So I was a volunteer for mission for the Episcopal Church, and I was living in Liberia for a year. I was 25 years old, and I came to that experience with a real sense of, I'm going out there to help people, and this is what it's all about. It's all about others. It's not about me. And thankfully, at the orientation that we had for 2 weeks before being sent out at the head office of the Episcopal Church, I learned a few things about how actually it's a mutual experience. This is about relationship, which kind of helped prime the pump in terms of thinking of it that way. But when I got there, I remember feeling after a number of months, maybe 7 or 8 months, feeling so frustrated that I didn't have any friends. I kept telling myself, I don't have any friends who are Liberian. And I started to think about that term friend and what it meant to me. And I realized that for me, friendship meant someone who I could, tell stories to about my life, who understood all these things about me. And it was a lot about communicating who I was, my fears, my dreams, all of these things, a lot of talking. And I realized as I thought about it, I'd been introduced to a friend of a friend who I really liked to spend time with there in Liberia. She had a small shop along the main road. And she'd been to high school and spoke standard English, which was there was a language barrier. A lot of people spoke a tribal language or pidgin English. which I didn't always understand fully. And so I would sit with her and just hang out, and we wouldn't say anything. And at first I thought she was ignoring me. But then when I left after a few hours, she would smile and shake my hand. That we had these long handshakes in Liberia that were complicated, and so I felt this real connection to her. And finally, it took me months to realize that we were friends, and that she knew hardly anything about me, and I knew hardly anything about her. But there was this deep connection that we felt in the time that we spent together in silence, just watching the world go by, experiencing life together. And it just blew my mind when I realized that friendship could be something different than what I thought that it needed to be. And it really started me down a road of looking for what other ways am I not seeing the potential beauty of connecting in relationship, the beauty of the world, who I am as a person, because I'm limited by my own cultural lens that I'm approaching the world through. And it really helps. So in other cross-cultural experiences after that, to understand and define friendship in a different way and look for it in a different way, has just brought me so much joy.
Thank you. First person to unmute gets to go next.
I don't mind kicking in. I mean, I want to try and be cheeky and speak quickly and get two stories in, if I may. But one of them actually comes from Wadi A's diocese, with taking a group of pilgrims to worship in Ramallah on a Sunday morning in the middle of the Palestinian territory. And I remember saying to the pilgrims that it was important that we went, but the prospect that there was a high probability the service would be in Arabic. We'd have no understanding really of what was going on. The liturgy would convey what we needed to convey. And I'd never been to Ramallah before. I've been privileged to go back 3 or 4 times since, and to arrive to find that the community there had made the active decision to choose hymns that could be sung in Arabic and English, and to kind of just enable us to feel as much a part of them as if we had always been part of them. And then I can remember sort of disappearing into the vestry with Father Fadi, and then coming back to find that in the kind of that wonderful kind of, wherever you are, there's always a space to have coffee after church. And if you had not known, it would have been very difficult to know which of those Christians had come from Palestine and which had come from the parish I was then in. And for me, it was just a real experience of how our Christian identity can overcome all of those kind of boundaries. And with the gift of our Anglican Episcopal identity, the liturgy gives us a shape, and then out of that we can create the opportunity for a Pentecost experience. It really was a Pentecost moment, as I was humbled by the hospitality that I was shown. The other, I suppose, just quick question, story is my main link is with Kenya. I've been going to Kenya for 15, 16 years, and you see a lot of exciting things, but I suppose the thing that constantly challenges me kind of goes like this. For most of us on this call, if not all of us, we will have woken up at some point this morning. We will have probably had some breakfast. Some of us may by now have got into a car to travel somewhere. And I wonder how many times God has been thought of in the course of that journey. And my experience of engaging with the Kenyan Christians is that if I had been in a Kenyan context, I would have woken up and thanked God for seeing the miracle of the new day and not taking it for granted that I would, which is a prayer maybe we're all uttering a bit more now than we were a year ago. I would definitely have said grace over the cup of tea, let alone the breakfast I was having. And I would have prayed for safe travel, and I would have thanked God I'd received it by the time I'd got there. And that seems to me to be something that has really challenged my way of being aware of God in the small things. And it's not context specific, albeit I suspect we continue to see it more often in the Kenyan church than maybe we do in the English church. So 2 quick stories of cultural change and sharing.
Well, tell a story about a place that Elizabeth knows well. That my first time in Africa was in Tanzania, and came later than the rest of the group and flew into Dar es Salaam, and then got up early Sunday morning to drive to Dodoma, which is where I think I maybe first met Elizabeth when she was serving in the diocese, helping with carpenters' kids. And so got to church late in the middle of the service and in the cathedral there in Dodoma. And so in the middle of the sermon, and got there at the moment when the person preaching said that, quoted an American bishop, that the mistake, the sin of missionaries from past generations was that when we went out into the world, we carried the gift with us. And now we know whenever we meet in community, we find the gift there. And so this deep sense of incarnation. And every time you get the privilege of being out in the wider Anglican communion with parishes or dioceses or whoever you're with, schools, clinics, all the things that the Anglican Church does across the world, I find how much we learn about innovation and grace. How much has to happen, whether it's in Burundi, after the wars, in Port-au-Prince after the earthquake, or, in our own country, in New Orleans after Katrina. The work of the church to be out in the world, the deep resilience that the church brings is, I think, for me, always a gift. And so what we receive in these relationships is remarkable and transformational.
So I've been pondering about this question for some time, and I don't know, I think it fits me that all the ideas, all the experiences that I've had that were that changing had to do with liturgy. And I know it was asked of us to name one, but I'm gonna sort of cheat like Lee and just name two if I may. The first one is actually not that long ago, one of my last big trips before Corona. I was representing our diocese and our province in a meeting for the USPG in Barbados on Epiphany, to go each into a different church and be present in their worship and to preach. And they had sort of neglected to tell us about that the evening before, well, the night, to be honest. So, it was an interesting experience of being part of liturgy, because it was refreshing to see the whole community of that church coming together is being part of liturgy. After the service, I was told that my sermon was too short. It was like 25 minutes, and that was too short for them. And even with my extremely short sermon, the service took about 3.5 hours. And the thing for me is, you have all this lovely community with their elders and their young who come to church dressed in their finest. You have everyone serving, whether they're in the choir, whether they're acolytes, you name it. And the whole point of a Sunday is being at church and then having a family meal afterwards. And that was refreshing to see that there are still communities that has that as their center of their Sundays. So that's one. The second one actually happened in my junior year at VTS. So that was the Easter of 2015. And I got the opportunity to go with friends and do the Triduum at St. Paul K Street in Washington, D.C., which is a church that some of you might have been at. It's an Anglo-Catholic church, lovely church. They really take their liturgy really, really seriously. And the whole experience was wonderful, because I, as a person, come from a church that is a broad church leaning towards the low side of church. That's my home parish, at least. And being at a church where we had everything that was covered, you had all the icons, you had all the everything covered. And then we started the Easter Vigil. And then when the new light came in, you had the lovely music, you had the fanfare, you had the bells, you had the icons all revealed. And it was such a lovely experience, such a different experience from everything that I've had before. And to this day, it still gives me goosebumps whenever I think about it. It was this wonderful, different way of celebrating Easter Vigil. For the idea of having the organ silent for the entirety of Lent, the idea that we celebrate the new fire, we celebrate the resurrection of Christ in such a manner, such enthusiasm was really changing for me in the way I perceived liturgy after that, and in the way I perceived Easter Vigil after that. So.
Thank you. That's lovely. Anne-Marie?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's beautiful to hear everybody's responses. I've been reflecting, in listening to everybody else, I've been reflecting on the fact that I've been a priest for 2.5 years, and so I haven't done international travel during that time. I've had 2 kids, so I've been like pretty grounded. But I did a lot of travel before that time. So for me, I have memories of Jerusalem, of Ramallah, of the southern part of Africa, of India, of parts of Latin America, and those encounters, but none of them in a ministry context. And so, so that the experience that kept coming back to me was our pilgrimage to Montgomery and Selma, which is in the United States, but as a native New Yorker, spending time as an adult in the South and encountering the physical places. I'm sorry, I've got a little one playing with coins in the background, so that's what that noise is there. So that's the experience that I've been thinking about, is just and what struck me in those trips, that as we talked about a little bit before, we did a virtual pilgrimage this year rather than going to the physical places. And so I've been thinking a lot about the difference between physically being somewhere and the kind of energy and experience that you have when you're on the ground interacting with people, feeling, smelling, experiencing the physical place where something has happened, and the kind of experience and intimacy of that, especially when when you're encountering an environment that feels very different, down to the smell and the temperature and the trees that are growing and the things that you see around you, the way people are doing everything. So so I've been thinking about that. Sorry, a little bit distracted here for this for this question.
That's okay. It's great that Magdalena was able to chime in as well and offer her wisdom. And Olivia, we'll turn it over to you for the last story. Is this part of our time?
Okay, so as part of my training, I was so blessed to be able to do a fair bit of traveling. And I spent a significant amount of time in India, the Church of South India in the USA, the Episcopal Church in Philadelphia, and New Zealand, Aotearoa, the Tikana Maori, so the Anglican strand of the Maori community there in New Zealand. And I have to name all those places because I was blessed to do that through friendships made on the 2008 Lambeth Conference. And I know that some of my friends from then are watching. So I hope I didn't miss any countries. I'll be forever grateful for those opportunities. But it was at the 2008 Lambeth Conference that I first encountered the Melanesian brothers and sisters and the sisters of the church who provided the chaplaincy support there. And I just fell in love with them, as everyone does who has the pleasure and the privilege of meeting them. So I also spent some time in the Solomon Islands, and I became an associate of the Sisters of Melanesia. And it was my time with them and also with the Sisters of the Church that I encountered such joy in my faith that I have never known. They were always smiling, always giggling, singing, just giving thanks for the smallest things, you know, the smallest things in my mind. They were just incredible women. And whenever I read the Beatitudes, they always come to my mind. So I was very grateful for that, and that joy has stuck with me.
A beautiful story. I'm struck by just the power of the global church has had on each of you in terms of your own development as Christians, your role as leaders in the church, and what a gift that is to all of the communities that you serve, that you will all bring that experience of looking at the opportunities for cross-cultural relationships, be it halfway around the world or halfway down the block. And I think that it's a really powerful thing for all of us to be able to look at our faith through those lenses. As no one is probably surprised, once you get people talking about their faith and stories, we're sort of running to the end of our time. So we're not going to ask the last planned question, but I would love to open it up to those of you who have joined us. If there are any questions that you all have, you can put them in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer those. And if nobody has a question, I have a question, so we'll do that. But I know that I'm sure I can speak safely on behalf of everybody who has been with us for this last almost hour. Just what a joy and a privilege it has been to be with you all and to hear your stories. And it just makes me even more excited for what is to come between our communities, and you know, what God will do with all of the gifts and skills and people that we all have. So it's really, really exciting. And I do not see any questions in the chat or the Q&A. People are a little timid this first time, that's fine. My question would be for each of you, what is the biggest gift? Oh wait, hold on. Diana is asking, what church is Wadia actually associated with?
So I'm part of the Diocese of Jerusalem, and we're part of the province of Jerusalem and the Middle East. And I serve at the Church of the Good Shepherd, the Church of the Good Shepherd in Salt, Jordan.
Great. Thank you. So my question for each of you, which I think will probably lead us very nicely into the closing prayer, that I hope someone else has prepared because I didn't, is what has been the biggest blessing for you in the last time of church in a very different way? What has been the biggest blessing that you've received in this new way of being? And I'll just let you unmute yourselves and share that whenever you're ready.
I think I never would have realized that we could feel the presence of the Spirit so deeply and feel connected to one another without physical presence. And so I've just been so amazed by the way that the Spirit has showed up and fed us and strengthened our ties both as a community here in Napa, but also given us the sort of the tools already existed, you know, Zoom already existed, but giving us sort of the experience and the desire to reach out and to have connections like this one.
For me, or actually for us, it has been a blessing to be able to meet from different parts of the diocese without the hassle of traveling. So since the pandemic, at least a small group of us, clergy in the diocese, have been meeting almost on a daily basis to do either morning prayer or evening prayer together. And it's people from different parts of the diocese. We've been able to have hold youth meetings that has people from different countries of the diocese. And in the recent history, and that has not happened for a long time. We actually were able to squeeze one in right before the pandemic in November of 2019, I believe it was, where we had people from different parts of the diocese coming in for a meeting, youth group meeting. But now that during this pandemic, we've been able to do that on a regular basis with ease, especially with the older age groups. I mean, younger ones, not that easy, but older ones. And they've gotten a lot out of it because they can meet people from different countries who are in their own diocese. So that has been a blessing as well.
So for me, it's been all those reminders that God is with us through these really difficult, challenging and dark times. And I have especially felt God's presence nearby in the forest that we are so blessed to live in the midst of. And it's kind of spending time with all of our non-human animal friends that I have really felt my heart sing and felt renewal and blessing.
Yeah, I can say I think at a time when it feels like so at a time when it feels like so many things have failed and there have been so many losses, I feel it's been so clear to me that our tradition has not failed and what we do as a church has not failed, that these are the things that are sustaining us through this. I'm seeing a question in chat about how folks in the US have been sustained during this time of so much civic conflict and civic and religious conflict in our country. And for me, I mean, I remember on the day of the Capitol, the insurrection at the US Capitol, there was we had liturgies already in place for the day, and they were exactly what we needed, to be able to gather together in prayer. The prayers spoke to the current moment, even though they weren't written specifically for that experience. And so for me, that was the stability of our tradition and the ministry that we are called to do. Nothing has changed in that during this time. So that's been incredibly reassuring to me and is hopeful. That the last thing I'll say is just the opportunity. What a huge for me, it's humbling, and it's an incredible gift to have the opportunity to preach hope and healing and possibility to folks during this time, and to be able to be part of helping to gather folks in prayer at a time of so much loss and uncertainty.
Anyone else want to pipe in?
Robin said at the beginning of this question, her surprise at how deep connection was possible without the physical connection, which has been, at least for us, and I think maybe for all of us, the center of our common lives for so long. And so the joy and surprise for me has been the ways in which we've deepened our prayer life together. Anne-Marie mentioned that is part of our wider story, but that we pray for each other by name morning and night, and now from around the country, and pray through each other's joys and sorrows has been a remarkable and sustaining part of this past year.
I think I just want to say, I think I've been really struck by how a year ago I had no idea about Zoom, and now it's part of everyday life. And what that's done is it's kind of democratized space in a very powerful way, because it's enabled fellowship to be sustained and continued, and new fellowships developed. I mean, what would it have cost us to bring all these people together just on this call, not just financially, but also environmentally, 12 months ago? And what would it have cost us to bring our people with us to one place? And I think one of the really exciting things that I've seen God do through this technology is this event. You know, is to watch 20 odd people between September and December from 3 different contexts have the kind of intercultural kind of experience engaging with scripture that would otherwise have been prohibitively expensive for some and in terms of time in others, and to be here at this point, not knowing quite what God's going to do with the journey, but knowing that thanks to the technology, which has become so much a part of everyday life, there's the people who are on this call, there's those who will join in the journey over the course of the next 12 months, who will be able to have that intercultural experience of seeing that God is bigger than anything we can possibly comprehend, because space has been democratized thanks to what COVID has made us do.
That's a great way to end that. I know there are still a couple of questions. We will get to those in a few minutes, but we just want to, before Robin ends the live stream, just want to thank you all from wherever you may be for joining us, and to keep your eyes open for information from your respective parishes about what we'll be doing together next during Lent. Each of the communities represented in this relationship will be leading a time of worship, and we'll do that collaboratively. Heavenly Rest is actually, we'll be leading the first act of worship, and Olivia will be joining us as our preacher. And then as we go through Lent, each community will host and will invite a preacher from a different community so that we are actually worshiping together in multiple ways as we do this. And then after Easter, we will be looking at I think a 5-week curriculum around eco-justice and care of creation, which will also bring in different voices from the wider Anglican Communion, in addition to the ones represented already. So definitely a lot more exciting things happening. And then our hope as well is too, if you have something that your parish is doing online, share that with, to share that with each other so that maybe we could all go to church in Jordan virtually someday and listen to the liturgy in Arabic, which is so gorgeous, or go to church in California, or if we have other Lent and Easter programming, to share that with each other so that we can really pray and be together as much as we can. So again, thank you all so much for joining us on the live stream, and we wish you a happy Saturday. It's Saturday, and those of you on